Hello everybody and welcome to the roughest road in Surrey, where I am beginning my first drive review of this, the brand spanking new Lexus NX. And doing videos on cars like this is always a little bit bittersweet for me because on the one hand, I really feel very out of depth driving and talking about anything like this because I don't really tend to know much about these cars. In fact, before today, I hadn't really driven any of the sort of core Lexus lineup, perhaps because other than the LFA and LC500, none of it really interests me. But cars like this are very important for the companies who make them and the people who buy them. The NX is actually Lexus' best-selling car here in Britain and most of the rest of Europe. In the USA, it's outsold by its bigger brother, the RX. In order to tell you just a little bit more, I'm going to hand you over to the ever more knowledgeable voiceover JayEmm.
Considering the Prius is the car which introduced the idea of a hybrid to the masses, Toyota has been somewhat conservative with their powertrains ever since. In fact, where many other manufacturers have already electrified much of their range, this new NX is the first car from Lexus to offer even a plug-in hybrid option. Here in Britain, the range begins with two models, the NX450h and the 450h Plus, H denoting hybrid and the Plus a plug-in. Prices start at just under £40,000 and go up to just under £60,000. A base 450h Plus is about £10,000 more than the 350, but does come with a higher level of equipment as standard. As Lexus go, the new NX is a relatively conservative design, but still stands out and is clearly identifiable thanks to its large spindle grille. It is moderately larger than the outgoing car, with length, width and wheelbase all slightly increased. Most impressively, the rear track has been largened by 55mm, just over 2 inches. This should increase stability under more exciting driving conditions. The big news for many will be on the interior, where Lexus are debuting their new Tazuna cockpit concept. To some, this will not seem particularly revolutionary, but to others, this will be the most significant change made to this car. Historically, Lexus has revelled in creating infotainment systems that are odd at best, infuriating at worst. All models now get a simple, large touch screen, with the top spec cars getting a huge 14-inch display. Computing power is up, with even the base model having a processor 2.5 times faster than the outgoing one. Button count has been almost halved to create a more elegant feeling interior, and my only real criticism is that the plug-in 450h Plus cannot have the upgraded 17-speaker Mark Levinson stereo, presumably for packaging reasons. That's a real shame because historically, the Mark Levinson stereo in a Lexus has been one of the best value for money audio systems on the market. In fact, their dedication to music is such that they even hired a jazz musician, Jiro Yoshida, to consult on the car's beeps and bongs. Upholstery options include both artificial and genuine leathers in a selection of colours, with typical Lexus flair for the stitching on this F-Sport model. Space is good for passengers, with ample legroom in the rear, although not oodles of it. The boot, though, is very impressive, with almost 550 litres of space. Compared with the competition, powertrain choice for the NX is very limited and a touch confusing. Both 350 and 450 have a 2.5 litre Atkinson cycle petrol engine combined with a pair of electric motors. A large 134 kilowatt unit up front and a smaller 40 kilowatt out the back. Because of this, all UK specification NX are 4-wheel drive as standard. For customers who need off-road ability, this is unlikely to be a class leader, but Lexus have worked on both hardware and software to make sure this is a car that is more usable more of the time. The key differences between the 350 and 450 are twofold. Firstly, a more powerful and sophisticated control unit means that the total system output of the 450 is 305 horsepower versus 241 for the 350. This drops the 0-62 time from 7.7 seconds to a reasonably brisk 6.3. The 350h is a traditional self-charging hybrid, but the 450 is the one with plug-in capability. It has a fairly large, for this segment, 18 kilowatt battery pack, meaning pure electric range should be in excess of 40 miles. The 350 can also drive in pure electric mode, but its abilities are limited by comparison. Both cars have the extremely clever Toyota Lexus eCVT gearbox. It's not actually a traditional CVT, instead it's an arrangement of gears, motors and engine which make one of the most seamless hybrid systems in the business. In recent times I've driven a number of plug-in hybrids, but found some of them are very compromised. Lexus have put a lot of effort into making sure this isn't the case. Not only is the boot the same size for both models, so is the fuel tank, 55 litres, ensuring good range in all conditions. Plus, when the plug-in battery pack is drained, the car will still continue to operate as a traditional hybrid, so you'll still get both power and fuel economy benefits. For someone who does big miles, often with a lot of luggage, this gives the NX real appeal. Most traditional plug-in hybrids, once the battery pack is drained, really suffer in terms of economy. Lexus say with this car, that should be minimised. Specifying your NX is a touch more complex than it perhaps needs to be. Base models are reasonably well specified, coming with things such as wireless Apple CarPlay, wired Android Auto, dual zone climate, front and rear parking sensors, reversing camera, heated front seats, auto folding mirrors, power tailgate and bi-LED headlights. To this, you can add either Premium or Premium Plus packs, and they bring with them things like extra lighting inside and out, power functionality for the seats, more safety kit, better parking aids and such like. The car I'm driving today is an F Sport model. These come with black detailing on the exterior and some sporty touches inside like the aluminium pedals and a different steering wheel. Unique to the F Sport though is the adaptive variable suspension. I did promise you this was confusing and here's why. Above the F Sport you have the Takumi. This is in theory the most luxurious variant of the NX, and comes with Takumi-specific 20-inch alloys, the Mark Levinson Hi-Fi, a digital rearview mirror, panoramic roof, and real wood trim inside. But it does not have the adaptive variable suspension of the F Sport or some of the nicer interior touches like the pedals. So if you want the most comprehensive specification NX, you in fact need to buy the F Sport and option the Takumi pack. Given the number of cars Lexus sell here and the demands of their buyers, I think this is complicating things perhaps a touch too much. So there in a nutshell is what the car's all about. How does it work in the real world?
I'll confess that when the email came through inviting me to drive this car, I didn't exactly leap for the accept button. But I am so very glad that I did, because as it turns out, this is probably one of the best normal cars I have driven for quite some time. Now, let me go through some of the reasons why. Not only do you have that class-leading amount of storage in the back, but this is a car which simply exudes quality, something you'll never get from a spec sheet, I appreciate, and probably one of the reasons so few people have actually gone as far as trying a Lexus. I suppose other reasons, if you're a petrol head like me, would include the fact these cars are available exclusively with a 4-cylinder engine and CVT gearbox. I have to be honest, for a normal car in regular usage, the CVT isn't really much of an issue. If you do put your foot down, it will give you that usual flare of revs and it doesn't exactly make a great noise, but for the most part, this car is nearly silent anyway. That's not much of an issue. The car, I suppose, that's closest to this I've driven in recent times would be the DS7. That's been on sale for a little while now and in truth is a little bit smaller than this. However, if you go for the top spec model, like the one that I had for about 10 days, it costs you the same as pretty much a top spec NX. As you can probably tell, this is a European specification car, which is why I'm on the wrong side of it. That means there are a few subtle differences between this and the cars that most UK customers will be buying. Perhaps the biggest is the fact that nearly everybody in the UK specs the panoramic roof. Apparently buyers in Europe not so fussed about that. For me, such an option is absolutely essential in a car like this and is key to preventing the rear from feeling just a little bit oppressive, which in its current state it does. And that's a shame because this is a car that really does feel very, very high quality. Unlike the DS, it takes a very different route to achieving that sense of quality. The DS, I would say, has perhaps the slightly more special feeling interior. It's got nicer materials, a little bit more leather, some really funky stitching, some amazing switchgear as well that looks really quite trick. But the Lexus counters with having better technology and a feeling of absolutely unbeatable build. There is not a creak or rattle in this car, and that acoustic glazing does mean it's actually very quiet. In fact, even in the Sports S Plus setting, which is supposedly its most aggressive, the engine very often will not be running at all. It should also tell you a lot that despite this being a mid-size SUV with me on the wrong side of it, this is a car I can place with absolute ease. The moment I got in it, I was totally comfortable, very easy car to drive, and the steering's even pretty good too. I was shocked. No, it's not like an old air-cooled 911 or anything like that, but it's actually got a bit of weighting to it that you really wouldn't expect, and that means it's actually a very reassuring car to drive. Gives you that sense of connection with the road that you don't find even in some modern sports cars. The suspension is incredible too. I was nervous that the combination of a 2-ton car with a sports suspension and 20-inch wheels would produce a ride quality that really wasn't any good. I couldn't have been more wrong. This is absolutely fantastic. The DS may have had clever active scanning technology, but very often got a little bit flummoxed by some of the more difficult pieces of road. This just doesn't. This to me seems like an excellent example of making things the best they can be by simply refining what you have to the point of perfection. This is genuinely one of the most comfortable cars I've driven in a very long time. And as we are now on one of my favourite test routes, I shall put this car into Sports S Plus and tell you what it's like when you try and press on. The suspension does firm up a little bit, but still, it's actually pretty comfortable. Body control is not actually that bad. The car's got plenty of poke in it too. Never has it really felt shortchanged the entire time that I've been driving it. The main difference with that sportier powertrain setting is you will hear the engine cutting in just that little bit sooner. You can hear it there, and it doesn't sound great. It's a bit frustrating. This car is currently on winter tyres as well because it's just come over from Germany, so I'm not expecting excellent grip, but actually it's pretty decent. You see, people sometimes ask me why it is that I set manual focus on my camera here. This is exactly why, because it can't tell where I am. Hello, yes, this is me. Hello. I do apologise if some of this video was out of focus. Normally I set it manually for the exact reason you've just experienced, but today I thought, no, I'll give the camera a chance and I'll set it to auto, because that way if I've made even the slightest error, it should just correct it. As it turns out, what happens is it just goes off looking wherever it likes. So sorry about that. Turning circle is not a strong point of this car. It's not terrible, but neither is it spectacular. I actually didn't hate the trackpad system you had in things like the LC500, but many others did. This is a much more conventional system, and if I didn't know otherwise, I'd say that it was Google based. I have today been using its own navigation system. I've got to say it actually works pretty well. It's very clear, very easy to read, and talks very nicely with the heads-up display here. I haven't attempted to connect my phone to the system. This is the sort of thing that I'd like to play with when I have the car for a little bit longer. By the same token, I also haven't had the time to be able to test just how fuel efficient this car really is, including that critical stage when the plug-in hybrid system has no battery left. When I got into it, it wasn't full. It's currently on just over half a tank, and even still it's giving me an estimated range of over 300 kilometers, about 200 miles. One of the downsides of plug-in hybrids like this is because of the battery technology they use, you can't actually charge it that quickly. Even with the fastest possible charger, it'll still take the thick end of 3 hours to fully charge this battery pack. In the same time, you could have easily charged a Tesla from nothing to full just about twice. So if you do see yourself using electric-only power quite a bit, bear that in mind. However, this is not really a problem unique to the NX. Most other plug-in hybrids have the exact same issue. Throughout the car, you'll also find some touches that show you just how well put together a product this is. So up top, you've got a digital rear view mirror, much like I saw first in the Jaguar XE. So you flick this, and unlike your old school mirrors, what then happens is you've got a camera on the back that'll show you what's behind you. Very neat, very cool. The heads-up display is nice, clear, very easy to read, and beyond the fact it can't tell the difference between mile an hour and kilometers an hour, I actually really like it. But perhaps my favourite bit is the solution Lexus have come up with for the steering wheel controls. Recently we've seen this trend of manufacturers moving to touch-sensitive buttons in their cars. And not only is that very poor design, but I think in some cases it can be downright dangerous. Because the problem with a button that's activated when you simply touch it means that if you don't know exactly where it is, you're going to wind up annoying yourself by constantly pressing buttons that you didn't want. So, what have Lexus done to get round this? Well, if you look at the steering wheel, you wouldn't think it has touch buttons at all, but it in fact does. what happens is when you just rest your finger on one of these, the heads-up display will then show you where your finger is, and it'll tell you the function you're about to activate. So on this side, for example, I could change the distance for the radar guided cruise control. Then over here you've got controls for the radio and all that sort of stuff. I was about to say CD there, but I have a suspicion there's not a multi-changer in the boot of this, not even on the options list. My old copy of Bat Out of Hell may as well go on the wall now. Generally speaking, there aren't actually many buttons in here at all. Driving modes are chosen through this nice little selector here, which you can move left, right, or press for normal and custom modes, because those are the ones you want easy access to. Custom mode I've got set up, like many, where you have the suspension in its soft mode, but everything else is in sporty. I rather like it, although to be honest, for normal driving, normal mode does actually work pretty well too. You've got paddles behind the wheel, but because this is an ECVT, they don't really do all that much, and I would say leave those well alone. You're not really going to be helping anyone. Your window, wing mirror controls are all very conventional, but your door handle inside is now a button, and on the outside it's electronically activated too. And even that Lexus have made feel quite high quality, and that's not very easy to do. Just ask TVR. The seats also, unsurprisingly, really very good. Typical Lexus strong point. They're comfortable, they're very nice to look at, but surprisingly, they're also quite supportive too. Visibility is good, if not great, which is about as decent as you'll get out of a modern car. The A-pillar's not too intrusive, you've got a pretty good view of the road ahead. The B-pillar's set far back enough that it's not too in your way, and if you are a shorter driver or someone like my mother that likes to hug the steering wheel, that won't be a problem at all. And out the rear is okay, and again, if you want a bit more visibility, you can just use the camera on the rear view mirror. The mid-size SUV segment is now just as popular as ever and shows absolutely no sign of slowing down. Here in the UK, Lexus has always been something of a niche brand, and to people like myself, it's their constant use of hybrids and ECVTs which has put me off even trying one. But with this car, I feel like all the technology is mature enough, and for something which isn't supposed to be a particularly exciting drive, this is extraordinarily competent, very well put together, and with a little bit of character in it too. You wouldn't mistake this for anything German, not from the way it feels, not from the way it looks, and not from the way it drives either. I think it's actually a really, really well put together car, and if you want something like this, I'd say it's well worth trying. This is going to be one of the final pieces that I filmed this year, and I'm very happy to say it appears we're ending on something of a high note, because I wasn't sure really what to expect from this car, but it turns out it's rather good. I'd be lying if I said I'd be running down to the showroom tomorrow to place my pre-order, but that's just because I'm a weird and unusual chap. For all the sensible people out there, please do give one of these a go. I would have one over the DS7. I think I'd have one over an Audi SQ5 as well. In fact, from a quirky petrolhead perspective, I'd say the other thing to really consider would be something like the Volvo V60, because for your 50 to 60,000 pounds, you can get a fairly nicely specified one of those, even getting into the Polestar. And that, as an alternative sensible car, is also something worth considering. But this does feel just a little bit more cohesive, just a little bit better put together. No, scratch that, a lot better put together. And overall, I think it's a fine car. So, that's enough from me. Please like, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I shall see you all for the next one. Bye-bye.